Hi, this is Peter, and today we are starting a new series called Exploring Starter Decks. The series is pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to be showing you all the 4 starter decks that my friends and I were introduced to the game by Porktopus with. The first deck we are discussing is the Hollow Oak Starter Deck. This deck's main focus is on dark and nature spells. We will go further in depth about what each of these elements' playstyles are in future series. Stay tuned, but let me give you a short summary of their playstyles before we jump into the deck. Dark's playstyle is all about messing up your opponent, tampering where it doesn't belong, like that one cockroach in everyone's basement. I'm watching you, Fred. Its spells mainly focus on ripping cards out of your opponent's hand and off their board, like this card, Arduous Choice. The card, a level 3 dark spell, reads, force your opponent to discard 2 cards of their choice. If you aren't familiar with trading card game lingo, to discard is just to place a card from your hand into the discard pile, mainly the trash pile. This makes it a generally frustrating element to play against, because instead of just facing you man to man, Dark goes around your main defenses and slowly pokes at your advantage. Nature is a little bit different. Nature is all about growing and regrowing, replenishing your resources. It focuses on retrieving cards from your discard and getting them either back into your hand or your deck. Its focus is not necessarily to build a strong board, but to make the board sticky, hard to get rid of, and to make sure you always have sorcerers required to cast your important spells, always keeping you in the fight. Now that you understand the basics of the elements in the deck, let's jump into showing you the cards. We'll start with the sorcerers, the various creatures of the Hollow Oak. Since the whole deck is built around them, I thought it fitting to show them to you first. Let's start with the level 1s. Alright, so the level 1 sorcerers we have here are as follows. Birdwatcher of the Hollow Oak, Old Witch of the Hollow Oak, and Howling Phantom of the Hollow Oak. So let's talk first impressions. Right away, I am seeing a pattern. They all have decently average power and health, but clearly swing to one side. For example, let's take Howling Phantom. He has 2 power, which is just about average for a level 1. However, his health is 6, which is actually 1 point above average. Birdwatcher is even crazier, with a whole 7 health, making him a real tank for a level 1. This trend only grows as we go to the higher level sorcerers. So let's take a look at the level 2s now. So here's what we've got. Pterodon of the Hollow Oak and Arrowlin of the Hollow Oak. For these two, their power stat actually dips below the level 2 average of 3, but is balanced by their insane health. Just look at Arrowlin's 14. By the way, that's 14 health right there. Bro is seriously packing. This exemplifies the Hollow Oak's playstyle. Sit back, soak up the hits, and slowly wreak havoc on your opponent through your disruptive spells. Now, I know you are itching to see those spells, but we have one more card to get to first. Let's talk about the level 3 of the deck. Now please welcome Wrath of the Hollow Oak. Wrath breaks the usual mold of the Hollow Oak cards. Instead of only being able to take hits, he can dish them out pretty well with his 3 power. Getting Wrath on the board is usually how the deck begins to apply pressure on the opponent. Now what you've all been waiting for, it's time for spells. As previously mentioned, the Hollow Oak deck mainly uses dark spells, so let's start by exploring those. Alrighty, the dark spells in this starter deck are as follows. Dark Trade, Dark Card, and finally, Arduous Choice. Allow us to begin with checking out Dark Trade. This level 1 dark spell allows you to shuffle 1 card from your hand into the deck, as you can see here, and then draw 2 cards. This makes it very useful to cycle through your deck and get the cards you want to see into your hand faster, while stopping yourself from clogging your hand with cards that may not be useful to you just yet. Now on the surface, this card may look like it has nothing to do with Dark's playstyle. I understand the thought in fact, I had the very same thought until Porktopus explained it to me. Comment down below if you buy his logic. Dark Skull is to slowly rip your opponent's advantage to shreds, and this card helps it maintain its own advantage while doing so, making it so that it doesn't also run out of resources while trying to mess with your opponent. In any case, I think this card is the most useful in the beginning of the game. While you are trying to get through your board set up with higher level sorcerers to get access to your higher level spells, this card can help you get those cards into your hand faster. Not to mention the amount of times my friend LC cast it near the end of the game while playing against me and got the perfect cards to swing the game in his favor. The Dark card lets you discard a random card from your opponent's hand. This will allow disruption of your opponent by potentially taking an important card from their hand. We usually do this by having the opponent fan out their hand without us being able to see the cards. And then you just grab a card from their hand at random. That is the card they discard. There have been so many times I have lost due to this one spell ripping my most important card out of my hand. Finally, Arduous Choice makes your opponent discard 2 cards of their choice from their hand. Now, although they have a choice in which cards to discard, this is still a very strong card, even though it takes 3 spell energy to cast, because it's a level 3. This can easily ruin your opponent's entire strategy as it puts you plus 1 card in advantage. Now that we've discussed the dark spells, let's quickly mention the nature spells. The first nature spell I want to mention is Mushroom Recycling. This little guy. This is a level 1 nature spell that allows you to retrieve a level 2 or level 3 sorcerer. Now again, if you aren't familiar with TCG lingo, to retrieve a card is to add it from your discard pile to your hand. So this card lets you add 1 level 2 or 3 sorcerer from your discard to your hand. This is useful for recycling your rats, which is this guy, as you only have 2 copies of the card. Remember, you may only ever have 2 copies of 1 card in your deck, so being able to use Wrath more due to Mushroom Recycling is very useful. Another important spell we must discuss is Treasure Trunk. This is a level 2 nature spell that allows you to discard 1 card and then lets you add 2 sorcerers with different names from each other from your deck to your hand. Search. This helps you find sorcerers you need and get them to your hand faster, allowing you to set up a bigger board sooner. The final nature spell I want to talk about isn't actually just a nature spell. It is a level 1 nature and alchemy spell called Minty Gum. Now, a few of you may have been astute enough to notice that none of the sorcerers in this deck have the alchemy element. So you may be asking, how they cast the card? You would be correct in that question. I was confused at first too. Here's what you need to understand about spells to understand this specific card. Only 1 element on the spell needs to match up with any 1 element on the casting sorcerer. So, for example, Birdwatcher right here can cast Minty Gum because they both have nature. Wrath, however, cannot cast it because none of the elements between them match up. Now back to Minty Gum itself. You heal 5 health of 1 sorcerer you choose. Quick, not that it does not heal past the sorcerer's original health. So let's look at Birdwatcher again. If Birdwatcher was at 1 health when he casts this card, and you choose to use its effect to heal him, he would end up on 6 HP. If he was on 2, he would heal up to 7. However, if he was at 3 or more, he would still only heal up to 7, because that is his original health. In any case, this card is one of the ways you keep your board round. It allows you to heal your powerhouses like Wrath and keep them on the board for a couple more turns, which in turn keeps pressure on your opponent for a couple more turns. The final spells we need to talk about are not dark spells, nor are they nature spells. They are neutral. In any case, you need a refresher. If a spell has neutral, it can be cast by any sorcerer regardless of that sorcerer's elements, provided that sorcerer has enough spell energy left to cast this turn. There are 3 neutral spells in this deck, all of which are level 1. This first spell is called Stack of Coins. It just reads, draw one card. It is very simple and self-explanatory card. It just helps you cycle through your deck towards your important cards faster. Next up, we have Cannon, which reads, inflict 2 damage to one sorcerer on the field. It's just a bit of extra damage that you can bring out one turn in addition to your 1 attack in your battle phase. Finally, we have Call for Support. This one may be the most complex of the bunch, but is still relatively simple. This card lets you search a sorcerer with identical elements as a sorcerer who cast this card. This also implies the same level, because different levels of sorcerers have different amounts of elements, and therefore different elements. In any case, let me give you an example of how the card works with everyone's favorite example card, Birdwatcher. If Birdwatcher cast this spell, you would be able to search a sorcerer with Nature, Wind, Dark, and Neutral. In this deck, your options would be Old Witch, Howling Phantom, or a second copy of Birdwatcher. If Wrath were to cast it, however, your only search option in the deck would be another copy of Wrath. Boom. Now that we mentioned all of the cards, let me quickly tell you about this deck's game plan. Alright, so the basic plan of this deck is to have Wrath on the field, along with either Pterodon or Aerolin. You actually want to avoid having only Wraths on the field, even though they are stronger because Wrath is only Dark and Wind. It doesn't have the nature element required to cast Minty Gum to heal itself. Therefore, you want to keep a level 1 or 2 sorcerer on the field along with your Wrath to help keep it alive. To get the game started, the goal is to get either of the level 2s out, and promptly use Treasure Trunk to search another level 1 and 2. Treasure Trunk. So you can keep building your board up. Use your Dark Trace to cycle to a level 2 if you do not have one already. And if you do, but do not have a Wrath, use it to cycle to a Wrath. Once you have your Wrath, use Call for Support on it to get your second copy so that the cards always live. I recommend only using Mushroom Recycling on your Wraths, and not your Pterodons or Aerolins, unless absolutely necessary. Once you have your board set up, tear apart your opponent's hand with your copies of the Dark card and Arduous Choice. Alright, that was the deck profile for the Hollow Oak starter deck. Like if you liked, dislike if you didn't, but subscribe either way. Also, make sure to leave a comment on your favorite Hollow Oak sorcerer. I've been your host Peter, and this is Arcasian Trading Card Game. Until next time, my friends.